Hey, Mun Kew. I think we have been teaching the generative AI course for the past 1 year.
Yep.
And we get from people from all walks of life getting interested in AI. And I think in the last 1 year, there's a lot of big advancements. We talk about ChatGPT's O1 engine. We talk about clouds, artifacts. Similarly, there's Vercel for product and even coding, UIs as well. We have Cloud's AI PC, which came later, and also Google's ChatGPT moment, like Notebook LM, and all these agentic AI workflows that's coming out. I guess we're reflecting back. What do you see as the most important trends now moving forward with AI itself?
I think, well, you've mentioned a lot of the products that have come out. What's most interesting to me has been what's underlying it there. So the big explosion of many different models, 3,000, 30,000 models and so on, have now started consolidating. People are finding the ones that work for them. What I see very interestingly is that people at one point were talking about model selection. Today, it's not so much model selection. It's, hey, there are certain ones that are going to make a difference to you, right? Let's do this and invest in them, right? So when we have people coming to our courses, and I think that's been probably about 60-70% have been government, right? The rest have been commercial, have been both local and international, right? There is a lot of commonality in the questions they ask us. Since I'm doing the responsible AI ethics and governance, we had to up the portion on governance from up to 1/4 now. It was probably about 1/8 before, right? And I think the other one that really drives people's attention, they wake up after lunch, right, is really the prompting.
Yes.
So whatever else we say, and I think everybody will admit this, if you can't do good prompting, you don't get the results you want. Yeah.
Yes, and I think that's where the beauty of what generative AI or the ChatGPT moment have brought us, right? AI used to be a subject where probably you have to hire a master's student or PhD student from either from academia or maybe in a well-known tech company. But today, that specific AI expertise has drummed down to the layman. When we talk about prompting, I had this really interesting story. I was talking to a 15-year-old girl during a dinner with a healthcare CEO, and we were talking. She was talking about using ChatGPT, and I think one of the interesting things I learned from her, which is also the same thing I've been teaching people to do, is not to use ChatGPT to generate essays for their assignments.
Right, yes.
Rather, write your own essay with a train of thought, with the logic of the thinking process, and then ask ChatGPT to help you to refine, to make it better, to organize the train of thought, and then put all those points within. I think that is the real value of the prompting. Less of the trying to generate as many things as possible, because people can read.
So that actually is exactly what one of the things I've taken out there is that there are 3 imperatives in Gen AI usage. The first imperative is to get everybody using it, right, at a personal level. That's just
right.
what that example you just gave. The second is the enterprise level, right, especially procurement. How do you buy products today that is AI enabled, right?
Yep.
6 months ago, that same product wasn't an AI product. Today it's an AI product, right? And then the third one is building your own Gen AI, or even just AI today now, this big enough, right? AI systems. And for these 3 imperatives, the first one at least, you need to have your policy first.
That's right.
What policy do you have as an organization, right? Like NUS does. NUS is very clear. How can you use this for staff in NUS versus for students in NUS? Simple answer, declare. If you're going to use it, declare it as a student, right? And if you are, I don't know about writing papers, maybe we should also declare it, right? But like you said for the essays, right? One of the things I read a long time ago was whenever you have AI involved, treat it like an uncle who's very well versed in the subject. If you have an uncle who's a professor, you should take the opportunity to ask your uncle about this subject, and you learn. Because as you know, your uncle's a professor, they treat you like you're 45 years old, not 15 years old, right? So they'll talk to you like a peer, right? You get a lot from that kind of engagement. You don't want somebody to talk down to you. And you know which GPT I'm talking about that talks down to you all the time, right? And if you do that, you improve, you learn. And that, what we're after is people learning. You will learn better. So if you discuss, but at the end of the day, you write up the assignment yourself. Now that's basically how your idea generation, your maturity of thought comes in. Then the second part is what you said. Let it help you in the grammar.
Yes.
Yeah. Right? No harm in that one. No, you're getting a copywriter for free.
That's right. I think what really surprised me, and we go through the courses, are the use cases that's brought by the students from their work life into our class, and then helping them to think through the workflow, working through, is it feasible? Or should we even be using AI or not? I think that part seems to come out immediately after the governance, and then where the data is, the cybersecurity piece of it. How much data do you want to expose to the AI? I think that these are questions I think the students didn't realize until they walk into the class.
And the good part about this is that I think of the many we've seen so far, probably less than 10%, right, would what we said you shouldn't use AI, right?
That's probably true.
Yeah. About half of them would be normal AI, building models, data-driven style. You can do it pretty much with just the traditional data science stuff.
That's right.
And then I think the last half is the part that the large language models, large action models, those type of things will actually make a big difference. And the good part is that we have this good mix among people. You expect if everybody was in one direction or in the other direction, then I think they'll be buying too much into the hype. The fact that they're going after real use cases and the use cases fall into these buckets, right, that makes them very real. So the opportunity to explore new things is more important, right? The mind is changing. Because what we do today, what we do tomorrow, the day after that, that's a continuing process. But the fact that the doors open, the floodgates, let's call it, the floodgates have opened is what we're after. We want that AI to be done, to be used, right, personally in the enterprise, and then to be used as the engines that they're being built as well.
So I think one of the biggest impact, which I think we discuss as well, is coding. So a lot of people are using AI in coding. There is this cursor where people can just build their own iOS app. We have a staff in NUS-ISS who can actually do this. Took some time, do the correct prompts, put it all together, now publish an app in iOS store. I think the question I'm much more curious is, what will happen to the software development process with generative AI on? I think it should be think of more as a tool, less of being able to subsume everything.
Well, there's two parts to think about it. Coding is individual endeavor, right? And I think a lot of the Gen AI is about coding. Software development is a team sport, right? You have a team lead, you have 3 coders, you have a use case, the testing, use case creator, documenter. You have a team of software call them a software team that work in many different roles, right? And that's more important when you think about how the future of AI partnering or taking roles in software development is going to change. If I have currently an agile team of 6 or 7 human developers, am I going to be more effective or less effective if I replace one or 2 or 3 of them with an AI? And if I replace them with an AI, which one should I replace? Should I be replacing the guy creating the test cases? Am I going to be replacing the guy doing the documentation? That would definitely sure, I think, right? The AI does a better documentation in many
Interestingly, this week is the AWS reInvent.
Right.
They now have a rack that is actually focusing on unit testing and documentation, which surprisingly, when I was listening to the keynote, that was one of the things that most software development teams hate.
Exactly. So the AI takes over those roles, right? The ones that you have still great ideas and insight, because you're not only building to you're not only building to a set of fixed specs, right? You're actually trying to create a platform that can have further um, ability to escalate, to build upon, right? And that one, if you do it right at the beginning, you're doing stuff that's really a lot about, in a sense, non-functional specs. And non-functional specs can be done better by people in some cases and by AIs in other cases. But if the AI is basically learning from past cases, right, then you're always looking backwards. So if I'm only doing functional specs, it's fine because I find specs that match in the past and in my current job, then it's fine. But because non-functional specs are not specified, how easy is it for us to say these functional specs correspond to good code that are enduring, that are easy to maintain long time? We haven't specified it in the specs. So where's your documentation? And then that means that you're asking the AI to actually elicit good from bad code first, right? Before it just says, okay, I will just learn from good code and not learn from bad code.
So it's the unknown unknowns.
Unknown unknowns, yeah. And the reality is, of course, it learns from everything, good and bad, right?
I've seen some of these AI code generation tools. People have done deployment of their own digital apps. Could be as simple as like building a Leaf application app. But if you dive a little bit deeper, in most of all these cases, I think one of the questions I have still is that the code is not ready for what I call production level.
Yes.
And in the enterprise deployment specifically, I think there is still a big gap away from where we think we should be.
But Google CEO said 25% of their code is written by AI.
Sure, 25% of the code is being written by their AI, but how many percent is being deployed?
We don't know that.
That statistics didn't come out, right?
But we also don't know whether it's 100% was written and 75% was thrown away.
Yeah.
But you're right. So numbers by themselves don't tell anything.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't tell a story. But I think what was really interesting to me in the last 1 year is I think a lot of the decision makers we teach in our course have come to the realization that they don't even know where the data is before they're thinking about the AI.
Data's missing, yes. Well, the other part about it is what we said. The first thing we do in our course is to ask people to come up with your use case.
That's right.
You must know your use case. And then when I go into the governance part of things, I said you must have a content policy. What's right, what's wrong. And that's true whether you're using AI or not AI, right? We don't have it right now. We kind of hide it along the lines. The problem is when we start getting the AI in, it's actually automation that's coming in, right? So once you start automating or autonomous, right, your AI is running by itself, then you start worrying what is your AI coming up with.
True.
Yeah.
But I get to do all the fun bits of doing all the things without guardrails during the class.
True, that's true. But then the thing is that it's not up to us. We don't decide the content policy. It has to be the organizations themselves that have to face it in the face, right? Put it in the face and says, look, this is right, this is wrong. Remember, there are two classes of people that we love working with, MINDEF and Home Affairs, because these people know exactly what's black, what's white.
Yeah.
Right? And then we had the other team, I won't mention who they are, where everything was gray.
True, but I think we also learn from them, right? Because they understand the rule of law, they understand the data governance, they also understand what is considered legal or illegal.
That's right.
And I think because they have very, very clear lines of that, when we teach those classes and hear their feedback on thinking about governance, it's totally, you can take it from a very, very different perspective.
That's right. But when you talk to business people, a lot becomes, it depends. Right? Well, it does, because if you're a startup, right, you think very differently from if you're an MNC and you have to worry about shareholders and things like this. So your risk of loss is much greater. And therefore, if you're deploying AI, what is your risks? So then it comes back to risk management again, right? But you can't manage risk if you don't know what you're managing. And you can't manage it if you don't know what your content policy is. What's right, what's wrong, right? If you are going to do something in health, Are you going to do health? Or are you going to do advisory? Or are you going to do diagnosis? That's a huge difference. Let alone treatment, prescribing treatment, right? Which we're probably asking for trouble.
Well, you very nicely segue to the construction of, or what we call hallucination, right? I want to get back
The
to
gorilla in
the room, right? I
yes.
think when I teach the course, my guidance is always hallucination is a feature, not a bug. I think there are a lot of developments in hallucination over the year. I think there was a cloud paper which we have totally different POVs on, okay, points of views.
Yeah, yep.
What are your thoughts on hallucination now?
I mean, it hasn't really changed too much because as a feature, hallucination as a feature is okay. You remember the was it, I forgot essential.
Yeah,
That basically laid out as exactly which was the greatest usage of
That's right.
ChatGPTs, right? GPTs in general. But number one was idea generation, and you idea generation by definition means things that are new to you, novel to you, right? If it's novel to you, at some point or other, it's a matter of scale, whether it's novel, it's new, it's really insightful, or suddenly becomes hallucination. Hallucination is when things become really out of whack, right? So it could be more not again not a black or white, but it's a matter of intensity of novelty, and the more you ask it to be more, to try to be a little bit more creative, tell me more things, tell me things I don't know. Your GPT is very obliging, right? So will it hallucinate more, hallucinate less? You ask it not to hallucinate, it means it only knows, it's only going to tell you stuff it knows, inverted commas knows, right? That means it might also be stuff you know.
But this is where, that paper from Cloud, and we talked about it before, is that what they have decided to do is just like what people do in MRI, where you attach certain notes onto your brain, and then they give you certain music to get your reactions of happiness, sadness, and then using that they do a MRI mapping of your brain on what kind of emotions you're experiencing and which part of your brain's light up. And I think Anthropic took the same concept and applied to a LLM, where it tries to put notes on the neural networks, and then when the LLM starts to make certain answers or generate certain answers that may be hallucinating, they're trying to pinpoint certain regions in the neural network as such. And I like, we have this discussion, and I like your point about experts actually have the ability to hallucinate more, given that they're experts. Yeah. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Okay, so basically, if you're an expert in an area, right, and I ask you for your expert opinion
That's
on
right.
something that's totally novel, you've never seen it before, right? Whether it's a medical case and you're a expert clinician, or if it's a scientific phenomena and you've never seen it before either. At what point is your speculation about the underlying cause of this phenomena? You're a cosmologist, right? Now you suddenly, there's the latest thing is that the non-flat universes are caused by two universes hitting each other and creating that. So now I ask you, what do you think is true or false? And is it going to be more speculation, more hallucination, or your informed opinion, right?
Well, I think that the scientific method has a way to clean this up, right? We all will suggest and hallucinate and given kinds of hypotheses, right? To today, string theory has no real proof, right? No
Yes,
real
that's
experimental
right.
proof,
Exactly.
right?
Yes.
But people believed in it because
Consistency.
the consistency, the elegance of the theory,
So
etc.,
if
etc.
many people hallucinate identically, then it considers possible hypothesis.
But we have those kind of situations happening in history, right? You think about, you used to be in the Ptolemy period, during the Aristotle time, people believed that everything revolves around the earth.
That's
right?
observation.
Correct.
So again, it's
Correct. The
consistent
observation,
observations. Consistent with observations, that's right.
seems to be consistent with observation, except for this phenomenon they call retrograde motion.
That's right,
Right.
yes.
And then suddenly someone came along and say, "Hey, you are all hallucinating. Actually, everything moves around the sun." And everybody was like, "What?" Yeah.
Basically is another theory that explains everything, including retrograde motion.
Correct.
Right.
So
more consistent with
more
observations.
consistent with the
Yes.
observations, right? So if you think about your point about experts having that ability to hallucinate, at least in the scientific method, there's a way to make the decision. can your data, can whatever you speculate meet the demands of the experimental data that you get? So the scientific method is a good way of cutting away all the hallucination parts of that.
So that's
of the
why
expert
I like
opinion.
to introduce two terms. One's convergence, there's divergence. If you have multiple large language models, and if they converge, right, towards a particular answer or sequence of answers, the likelihood is that those answers are consistent with what's happening in the world, right? You're not going to have two people or two large language models or two people hallucinating identically. Right. That's hard because hallucinations in a certain sense are way off. Right?
True.
So if you have multiple LLMs hallucinating or coming up with answers that are, for the same prompts or set of prompts, that one's in left field, one's in right field, one is in outer space, then you're likely to think that these are actually hallucinations. Inverted commas, what we consider to be divergent views, non-convergent views. So we have to think about why hallucination, why those are basically things that have a very social dimension to the way we describe it. But the reality is that if it's divergent from your observations, divergent from your needs, right? Then what you want is the ability to classify things that are useful to me and not useful to me, right? And I think that's important. Convergent, divergent. Coming back to that cloud paper, the Anthropic paper, there's another interesting part about it. In the human brain, the one that the part of the senses that is most closely associated with memory is taste, right? So you remember the Ratatouille movie?
Yes.
Right? Why did when the person tasted the Ratatouille, then he got memories of when he was childhood and things like this? That's because those parts of the brain are very closely associated. So taste and memory tends to, I'm oversimplifying, encode together, right? That's why you can elicit strong memories from tasting foods. But if you look at an LLM, you'll find that taste and memory are not encoded together. So the thing to remember is that the human neural net and the large language model networks are not constructed the same way. So things that we want to learn from nature right, have to be done judiciously.
True.
Right? Yeah. So whether we will find, for example, what they are hoping to find is that hallucinations happen in a part of the neural net uniquely on its own. Or is it the part that's going to be tied closely to areas of expertise? That's if it's uniquely on its own, let's lob off and give it a lobotomy, kind of an idea. That's the mindset. Then you end it with the idiot savant, right? He'll tell you very, very good at certain areas. But if it turns out that the hallucinations, right, is really where your strongest levels of expertise are, then here you're at the genius level. And in the part between genius and madness, it's a very thin line. You can't differentiate it so easily. Right. And those are some of the issues that we're going to hit when we start discussing hallucinations. It's not an easy topic.
True.
And it won't go away. So I agree with you. Let's treat it as a feature, not a bug.
True. Then I think you have alluded to talking about the concept of multiple models. So we have open source models, which I think at the beginning of the conversation, while we are talking about all the achievements, seems to be coming from the closed source models, the likes of the Google, Anthropics, and OpenAI. But I think one of the big paradigm shift this year was Llama, which is actually done by Meta, or formerly known as Facebook, in the open source models, where anybody is allowed to build their own model, and you can source for the weights across different forums, developer forums, etc. Where do you think the open source, closed source conversation on large language models are going to start having an impact? Because I think one thing I do see is there's a lot of specialization happening within the foundation models. You could see OpenAI is going towards reasoning. We don't need to give you the correct analysis in 1 second. We want to take our time. break down the process 10 seconds and then give you a potential answer that we think it is. Whereas you see Cohere, which is another big large language model, they have pivoted to serve enterprises where they just put the large language model on an on-premises environment.
That's right.
And then Mistral is trying to construct smaller models, but focusing on specific applications. Similarly to Anthropic has gone full enterprise, and OpenAI have gone full consumer. So I think we're also starting to see specializations among the LLM. So given the gap is closing so much between open and closed source models, where do you think this is going to go?
I have to admit upfront that I am an open source
It's same here. I'm also an open source fan.
So I'm always happy to see open source rise in that sense. And I'm right now, I'm quite happy to see that the open source approaches are hitting the same levels. You look at the China ones, they're all based on open source.
That's right.
And by the licensing agreement, they're all open source themselves. And every so often they'll beat in this competition or that competition or benchmark rather, I should say. They're beating the best in the market. But what does that mean? Do you really care? Right? Again, it's the convergence divergence issue. Right? Is the benchmark designed for general purpose? Is designed to reduce hallucination? So for some of them, is that the hallucination index is lower? Well, you can always reduce the hallucination index by making sure that everything is convergent.
That's right.
But then is it meeting the value that you want? That when you do that, and again, if you are going to be artistic, you want to do your DALI or Mid-Journey equivalents, right? Then do you want something that's very out there, right? And then wows everybody, yeah. And in that case, do you want it to hallucinate when you say, when you say something doesn't exist, like a unicorn, right? Can you hallucinate a unicorn? Just the thought of it. Unicorns don't exist, so every unicorn has to be, in a certain sense, a hallucination. So which one's more interesting, right? Now the only thing I say about unicorn is that it has one corn, right? one horn. That's it. Right? But otherwise, everything else is hallucination.
Yeah, I think that's where the limits of human knowledge ends as well. I don't know. What are you most excited about generative AI developments these days?
Would you believe me? I tell you the governance part.
I believe you, of course, right?
Because as I meet more, our call them students, the people that come to our courses, right? Even though they're not excited by governance, right? If they leave understanding that they need to know their use case as well. They need to know that they have to come up with policy first. If I don't have a policy, I can't do procurement, right? So now you said that I came across a very interesting term called procurement paralysis.
Yeah.
Why? Because I don't have an AI policy, but I don't want to buy anything with AI today unless I know whether it adheres to my AI policy that hasn't been written yet, right? So in all cases, for organizations to move forward, you must have version 1 or version 0.1 of an AI policy so that you can do procurement. If you want your staff to use Gen AI for increased productivity, you must have an AI policy. If nothing else, number 1, don't put anything confidential on the cloud, right? And number 2 is don't get caught. Right? Yeah. Right? I mean, if you want them to be really productive, the reality is that they put their work in the Gen AI. So you either need an enterprise version, right? Or you could allow them to put stuff in the cloud. But what do you allow them to put up?
I think the cloud providers have a clearer way of doing it. Is you have your own cloud environment. They have hosting multiple models. So I'm talking being very agnostic to all 3, or maybe all 6 cloud providers, including the Chinese ones, or even more than that. But I think where it's going is that most enterprises would choose to take a foundation model and then fine-tune their proprietary model based on the service level agreement with the cloud provider that we will not use whatever you use on your data to be trained. I think that
what's
is the
liability
yes.
that the vendor is willing to take is very limited, right? So it's the same kind of thing. If there's no real pain to the vendor to actually make a mistake, will they really look after your data correctly? There's been promises from people who make those voice operated bots like Alexa and Google and so on, Google Home and so on, that they won't listen to your conversations. But we know that it has been done, it's been documented, that some well-meaning researchers somewhere actually put the data. And because it's no longer in your control, right, then you have to trust somebody. And is the trust are you trusting an infallible organization or a fallible one? If it's got people involved, it's probably fallible, right? So you can't guarantee it. So then the question is, who is liable? Who's going to take the blame? The EU is looking at what's called non-contractual liability laws. And that means that you didn't sign a liability agreement, like between you and the vendor, for example. But even without that, there's a duty of care and so on, that liability that you have to take as somebody providing services. Then that's what they're looking at to create those guardrails for the offerings in AI, right? Purely because the potential for harm can be quite high.
Right.
Yeah. So we don't know that. And with the Europeans, with their GDPR having swayed the whole world thinks about privacy, right? The way they're approaching AI, the guardrails around AI, I think is also something that we have to be very cognizant of. And whether in Singapore we are going to be followers, leaders, right? But at the end of the day, we have to know what they are, right? And be able to say that we do this with a clear understanding of what's doable, what should not be done. Yeah. And I'm ignoring all the green and sustainable issues around AI as well. Yeah.
Well, I think that will get better. We're already seeing the hyperscalers are buying nuclear power plants, so I think we're getting there. Moving forward, I think when we think about generative AI and thinking about educating people, what do you think are the most important things you want them to get?
Number one, I think the first thing, most important thing is that what you do, right? But the part without guardrails, you can get easily started. You can get a lot of value. Despite doing the guardrails, I am a firm believer that you should be using Gen AI.
Which is why we are perfect complement of the course,
Yeah,
right? Because
that's right.
they are very excited at the beginning, and then once the guardrails come in, they start to realize, oh, this is what the reality is.
Right, but the thing is that you need to play with it. You need to get your hands dirty. It's not to be afraid of the guardrails, but it's the fact that be aware of the guardrails. If you can come up with a content policy, start small, start something. But don't forget the content. There are many things where you already launch products even without a content policy. Just wasn't without AI. Just a human being involved, right? Do you really expect your human contact agents, right, to really understand your content policy, right? They don't really understand the interpretation of the content policy.
True.
Yeah.
Some AI horror stories. I don't know whether they are people have bought a specific AI solution from a particular company and then realized that their CEO's emails can now be read because all the permissions start opening up. And I think it does make a lot of people cringe when the guardrails cannot protect even the most basic stuff, which is your own privacy, once you unlock all the AI.
Again, again internally, even though it's all private to the organization, right? Even within the company, there are different levels. Yeah. And if you're not aware of it, it's not people are not aware of it. It's just they don't think about it. So the other opportunity you have now is that everything's an opportunity. Now that AI, so cloud was the big one, right? When we started migrating to the cloud, not everything was supposed to go to the cloud, right? Lift and shift may have a huge overpromise, for example. But it was an opportunity to rethink your architecture, to really redo what you wanted to do, and then decide, keep this, throw this, migrate this, combine this. these opportunities don't come along very often.
But
in the data center.
Yeah, but it also
And AI is
appears
big,
that generative AI has also changed the architectures of cloud computing. I don't think,
Yes.
I think we are actually in another period where we are re-architecting applications all over again, but with an AI infrastructure.
So there are two kinds, right? There's AI deployed the way we deploy normal enterprise.
True.
Very workflow oriented, so it's stable, and then we stick in an AI here to replace a functionality, replace another functionality. The other one is when the AI become part of that platform. Then now you have, in a certain sense, a malleable architecture. Because what happens when your architecture starts self-adapting, right? That's not something that we are comfortable with. Right? You know when data centers have a lot of AI in there doing optimization. So they reroute their north-south channels and the east-west channels, right? Yeah. So the topology and so on within a data center, is it something that is really known to the people who first put together a data center, or is it the end result of optimization? So the end result optimization is a topology. Is it a black box topology, or is it a transparent topology? How comfortable are you? Right now it's black box, right? But you can show numbers. Before this is the throughput. After, my throughput is how many X better, then you're okay with it, as long as you're willing to accept it. But that again is part of your policy. I don't need transparency, right? If I can see the before and after, and the before is better, and the after is better than the before, right? And that's true of any form of AI. Do I want to accept AI augmented radiology? Well, what's my ground truth? Right? If my AI is doing 20% better than my ground truth.
So I know one of the things we haven't really talked about is because of LLMs, just as before we had cloud and cloud enable large scale data ends up going in and AI suddenly showed up, right? Yes. So there is always a precursor before the next big technology that comes into play. And then now we have all these agentic AI workflows. Where do you see things going? Like, for example, robotics, which is the question that really is on my mind, because now the large language models actually form the brain of a lot of robots that used to be just a mechanical arm. So we're beginning to see the real humanoids like Tesla's Optimus and Boston Dynamics, the dog that's always running around all the parks these days.
Well, we have a robotics grad cert in ISS as well, and we are going to try and morph it into something that's more aligned towards embodied AI, and that's exactly along what the lines you're saying, right? In the past, it was the physical implementation first, and then you add intelligence and you add in things like control, command and control. So you have this kind of very robotic, those things that are stereotypical of what a robot does. But today you're doing a different model. You're starting with an intelligence that has the ability to do things. So it understands that when you're cutting vegetables, it's not right. This is cutting vegetables because I have models of human beings cutting vegetables. I have data of human beings cutting vegetables. I use that to train the AI first. So the AI knows how to cut vegetables. Now give that AI a body, an arm, and a knife, and it will cut vegetables like a human being does. Right?
Well,
embody the AI with capabilities. But that's interesting, but also that's interesting and limiting. For me, it's at least a step ahead. But now here's a more interesting part. Why does it only need to have one hand to hold the vegetable, one hand to hold the knife?
Yeah.
Why can't it be two knives and 3 hands or things like this? The best AI surgery robot actually has 4 arms, right? And a surgeon has to learn how to use it because they can't operate 4 arms naturally. Yeah. So it's like Doc Ock in your Spider-Man, right? You have to figure out how to handle 8 arms easily. It's a training of the brain.
Yeah, it's what we coined in our class, right? are the AI here to do things better
Oh,
or
yes.
to do
Yeah.
better things?
Oh, yeah, always to do better things.
Well, the forearm situation is to do better things, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
you can
yeah, for
now
sure. Yes,
do
yes.
it for that. So now we've seen a lot of movements in AI, and I guess in the next year we're going to change our notes again.
Almost certainly, yes.
Yeah, I think in the next year we're going to start to have actual technical generative AI courses as well.
Oh, yes, our large language models were coming out, yes.
Yes.
So we currently have two courses, our Gen AI for business leaders. Everybody's a leader.
Yeah.
But the idea is that this is one where we expect everybody to pick up prompting. And not many guardrails in this one. It's a matter of understanding trust. Right? You at some point or other you will have to trust the AI. The same way that you trust your vendors today. Right.
And you just got SSG funding. So I
Yes,
think we will
yes,
have a
yes,
bigger
that's true,
intake
that's
now.
true. And the second course was fun because we call it supercharging.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
with
our
Gen
most
AI.
popular course.
Yes.
It's always oversubscribed.
And with supercharging is, I think, a great way of thinking about it, right? Because you already have your processes, you have your services, your products. You just want them to be supercharged, run faster, better. Yeah. And then you want to take it beyond the next level, which is do better things.
True.
Yeah.
I always enjoy that part of the course when they bring their problems and then I help them to scope down towards what AI really could do for them. And I think they walked out much more happier than they first come in worrying about all the things that they cannot do.
Yes. And the thing is that our participants have come from all walks. There have been technical people, there have been education people, senior management, administrators. Everybody benefits, and I think they enjoy the course. Yeah.
And then, of course, next year we will go more technical. Maybe we will proceed towards things like retrieval augmented generation, but more implemented in an enterprise setting. It's not just like, doing a custom GPT and, expect everything to work by itself. I think in the enterprise landscape, it's a little bit more tricky than that.
Very AI.
Fine tuning. How do you actually do fine tuning, right? Think about human feedback, reinforcement learning as such. And then you also talk about agentic AI. I think the flows are actually pretty interesting, even though I think there are now 4 dominant agentic design patterns: the reflection, the tool use, planning, and multi-agent collaboration. I think these things are still at its very, very infant stage.
But I think it's the one with the most potential, right? So what replaces workflows? Which could be, I won't call it agentic workflows, but basically it's more intelligent workflows.
Yeah.
In a certain sense, agents.
Well, we still can't have an app that can actually plan the vacation and help us to auto book everything yet.
Not yet.
That was the promise. That was the promise when it first came out, right? When people first prompt ChatGPT and then suddenly building up their entire itineraries, and then everybody said this is going to be the first use case, But till now we still couldn't see. So I think the planning flow is a little bit more complex than we think it is, because I think one thing that we did in the Supercharged class, and I think a lot of people don't realize, a lot of software processes that we do to help build digital applications are a closed transaction process, meaning there's a beginning and there is an end.
That's right, yes.
In an agentic workflow, it's actually very open. You do the first thing once, you prompt, you get an outcome, and then you reiterate it until you are happy, and then you close the loop.
Which is important, because this is what we call, even if your technology is only 70% accurate,
That's right.
you can meet your intentional outcomes 100% of the time.
Correct.
Yes, and that's the important part of AI. AI is normally built out of imperfect technology, but within a system context, it hits 100% success rates, or close to 100%. Yeah.
Okay. So I only have 2 quick questions before we close the loop. My first one is, what is the one thing in the past 12 months that you have changed your mind on?
Oh, I've changed my mind on.
Maybe about AI?
But I'm thinking about AI. What have I changed my mind on anything at all? I think no. If anything, it was. I thought 2024 was the year of video and audio and video.
Yeah.
right? And it turns out it's the year of the agentic AI. So it's really been I won't call it in your face, but I think the potential for an impact of using agents, AI agents, is really going to transform what we do a lot.
What's the one question that you wish more people would ask you about what you do or AI?
Oh, what question would people ask me?
Yeah, that you wish more people would ask you.
Never really thought about it. What would
I mean, people always ask you questions and then you're like,
But they ask me everything. I think I've got very naive questions, which I love because it's an opportunity. And then I've got those really technical questions, which is again an opportunity. So in a certain sense, for me, I'm actually pretty agnostic to the questions people ask me. All of them are potential for engagement, and that's more important, I think.
I wish they have asked me.
Yeah, I was going to ask you,
about-
what are those questions for you?
I wish that they would ask me more about what is the real cost of implementing AI.
Oh, that was painful.
Yes, I think a lot of people don't realize that actually the implementation cost is, until in the course I break it down for them and then they were like, oh, now I know why we have to pay so much for it.
So every time we create a Mid-Journey image or a DALL-E image, the power consumption of that is enough to charge your phone for a whole day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So
Yeah.
that I
1,000 images is about lighting 15 LED light bulbs.
Yeah.
That's about right.
So we do make it a point that to mention it in our courses. Yeah.
You do know that when we generate a 1,000 word email, right? It's as good as you have just run for 6 kilometers of energy. So prompt with great care.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay. I think we probably have exhausted all the topics. And we will welcome everyone to come by to ISS, NUS-ISS in the Ignite series. And of course, definitely come for our courses. I think Mun Kew had a lot of fun this year. And we are going to expect to have more fun because we keep sending WhatsApp updates to our students.
Yes, we do. We create a WhatsApp group for each of the 2 main Gen AI courses. They update us, we update them.
Yeah.
We've never tried to be the final experts.
Yeah. That's why we are very comfortable to call ourselves practitioners.
Yes. Yes. Practitioners make mistakes, but
Yeah.
we learn from our mistakes. Yes.
Okay. Enjoy yourself.
Yeah. Thank you all.
Thank you all.